please. And Scott, do you have a picture of the horseshoe or something that you could call out people to introduce themselves? Because I don't have that for this committee, so I won't know if I'm missing people, or I can just do it by people up on the screen. It's up to you.
I can look at the attendees list to see who's available, if that's what you're referring to. But Alyssa, I think, actually brings them forward.
I meant our committee for, but I'll do it from the screen. That's okay.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a good list of that yet.
Great. So it won't be by the horseshoe. Everybody will be surprised when I get to them. How about that? So, all right. Good morning.
We do
I see
need.
we're on the air, right?
Well, we do need one more for a quorum. We have 6 pictures up.
Yeah, Sophie's here. Should just or Representative Sylvester. They'll turn the camera on for a sec. So
Okay,
there we go. See, everybody's there. They're just hiding.
Beautiful.
I do that. So good morning. I'm Senator Dave Meerman. I represent Senate District 12, which is Knox County, with the county seat of Rockland. And Representative Sylvester, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Senator Meerman. Thank you for chairing today. I'm Representative Mike Sylvester. I represent District 39 in Portland. I'm the House Chair of this committee, but I'll be in a bunch of other committees today.
Thank you very much. We've seen you. Now you can do what you need to. We know you're kind of there, and we had a quorum to open. Representative Cuddy.
Good morning. My name is Scott Cuddy. I represent House District 98, which is Winterport, Frankfort, Searsport, and Swanville. And as Representative Sylvester will be in other committees today, I will be doing the timing. So if you are testifying today, if you keep your Zoom in gallery mode, you'll be able to see me, and I will at the appropriate time hold my phone up, and you'll be able to see how much of your 3 minutes is left. I will try to remember to do it at 30 seconds, and then I will cut in and let you know that your 3 minutes has expired and give you a chance to just wrap it up.
Great, thank you. Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Dick Bradstreet. I represent House District 80. That's Vassalboro, Windsor, Somerville, and part of Augusta.
Thank you. Representative Febworth.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning. Sarah Pebworth. I represent House District 133 in the Blue Hill Peninsula.
Thank you. Representative Morris.
Good morning. I'm Representative Joshua Morris. I represent House District 75, which is Turner, Leeds, and part of Livermore.
Thank you. Representative Drinkwater.
Good morning, Representative Gary Drinkwater, District 121, Milford, Elton, Argyle, Hudson, and it's a dreary morning up here in Milford.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm sorry for that. It's beautiful and sunny here in Camden, just for reference. You know where to go when you get bored up there. Representative Rader.
Hi, my name is Amy Rader. I represent District 125, which is a portion of Bangor, and it's always sunny in Bangor.
Representative Warren, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sophie Warren, and I'm here in my hometown, Scarborough Coastal District 29.
Thank you. And as people come in, we'll let them. And we have our clerk is Alyssa Thompson, who does a wonderful job. Unfortunately, when I talked about having that scoreboard that has the bill number, it meant we don't get to see Ms. Thompson as much as we used to. So I'm sorry for that, but I'm so glad you're back there doing such great work, and thank you. And
I truly don't mind not being on the live stream.
We have a tag team analysts, and today it looks like Steve Langland from OPLA is under there somewhere, and you'll see him, and they both our analysts do a great job too. So thank you all for being here, and we're going to have some public hearings today. So let me get the right script. So I have to kind of use the written one because we have so few bills in Marine that I never actually get used to doing this, but don't feel bad. So welcome. And this meeting is currently being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel, which you may be on it or listening to it. It also just does audio only, which can be good if you have bad internet. If you're on the Zoom meeting waiting to testify, you can't be seen or heard until you're called upon to speak. This meeting will be recorded and available to view on the committee's YouTube channel soon after this is concluded. If you're on a Zoom and you see your name's not correct, please fix that. So sometimes if you give a link to someone, they show up with your name, make sure it's all fixed right away, because we're going to call you out on it anyway, so you might as well just do it. I keep saying that about that this is new to us. It's not so new, but we still make mistakes, so be patient. Do not use the chat for anything unless you're having a technical issue. So all questions of persons testifying will be made through the chair. And the committee's great on that. We roll along, and we'll call on you. And if someone asks you a question, you'll get a little more time. It doesn't mean you get unlimited time. Representative Cuddy's going to call the 3 minutes. You're going to start answering the question. If you start off on your life history or somebody else's, you're going to get cut off. So don't bother. If somebody's already said it 10 times or 10 people have said it 10 times, don't go into a 30-minute dissertation on the same subject. Just think about this. Use common sense. We're going to be here all day. So please think about that when you're testifying. You will be appreciated. Your testimony will have more merit than thinking about, oh boy, what did he say in that? Yeah, so there's, or she, let's not be sexist. Okay, so when you're called upon, provide your name, where you live, and if you represent a group. Oh, let's see. We'll figure out how to take votes later. And so, did I miss anything? I don't see anybody jumping up on that. So we have, the order will be LD 1464, 1312, 1322, 1397, 1546, and 1201. So let me get that up. Okay. All right, well, unless anybody has any comments, anybody new is here to introduce themselves, I'm going to open the public hearing on LD 1464. And it looks like that will be introduced by Speaker of the House, Representative Facto. I don't see him.
I'm gonna give the speaker's office a call real quick.
Okay, we'll give him a second.
Jane Fagoli said that she will text him and get him going.
All right. Do you see, well, we'll give him a minute.
I'll do a quick public service announcement on ticks. They are rampant in my area, so I just want to warn everybody to pull out their white socks, take their precautions.
I know I had a couple on me this weekend, and my wife did too. So I guess the good and the bad. It's sunny, but ticks are out. Welcome, Representative Fecto.
Hello, thank you. Sorry for my delay there.
Oh no, first thing in the morning, you never know how long it's going to take a committee to get going, huh? So we have opened the public hearing on your bill, LD 1464. So you are welcome to begin when you're ready.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Senator Marymount, Representative Sylvester, honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I am Ryan Fecto, and I represent part of my hometown of Biddeford. I also have the distinct honor of serving as Speaker of the Main House. I'm here today to present LD 1464, an act to improve accessibility of affordable housing data. This bill is about increasing transparency and availability of data in order to help solve the affordable housing challenges we face here in Maine. As legislators, we all know that data is key to understanding problems and thinking through solutions to those very problems. The Labor and Housing Committee has heard a large number of bills aimed at addressing Maine's stark affordable housing challenges, an issue I have prioritized in my own work as a lawmaker. This bill was put forward to improve upon the data that we can draw from to inform our decision-making on affordable housing policy in two key ways. We have all heard from constituents, advocates, and state officials that an increasing number of housing voucher recipients are turning their vouchers back in because they are unable to use them to rent an apartment. That is troubling and highly problematic, but we don't have any data to explain why they are turning their vouchers back in. Is it because they simply couldn't find an apartment below the payment limit set by the local housing authority that issued the voucher? Or is it because they were being discriminated against as a voucher holder? Or is it because the apartments that they found failed to pass minimum housing quality standards? Or is it because they were rejected based on credit issues, eviction history, or previous involvement with the justice system? Or is it because their circumstances changed and they didn't need the voucher anymore? Or was there some other reason? We don't have these answers because housing authorities are not obligated to ask people this question when they return their unused vouchers. This bill requires that the information be collected and provided annually to the legislature so that we can better understand what, if anything, we can do to help address this problem. As members of the committee are no doubt aware, Maine has received a very large investment of federal dollars to provide relief to tenants whose ability to pay their rent has been negatively impacted by the pandemic. That relief is also highly valuable to landlords who have their own bills to pay. Getting that money processed and out the door is a difficult task because the demand is so high and because there are many federal rules and guidelines to be followed. But many of you may be getting outreach from constituents like I am, people who are annoyed and frustrated that it's taking 4, 5, 6 weeks or more for the rent relief applications to get processed, while their landlord is making it clear that they can't wait forever. These renters are anxious and scared, and so are their landlords, frankly. No one is looking to scapegoat the organizations that are working so hard to process rent relief applications. However, we cannot help to fix this problem without knowing more about how long applications are taking to process, and more importantly, why they are taking that long. This bill would require that key data points be provided to this committee on a monthly basis to help you and all of us as concerned citizens understand what is happening on the ground and what barriers our community member partners are encountering that are keeping them from quickly delivering the help that tenants and landlords need. Once we have that information, we will be in a better position to assess whether there is action we can take to address these problems. Like all of you, I'm deeply concerned about our state's affordable housing crisis and committed to finding solutions wherever possible. This bill would provide us with critical data and information to help guide our housing policy initiatives, and I hope you'll join me and supporting LD 1464. And I just want to underscore once more the importance of recognizing the work that's being done by the various agencies across the state regarding this work. I'm not trying to say that they are not doing their hardest to make sure that these resources are getting out to our constituents and our neighbors. But there's clearly a challenge when you're trying to build a program overnight, that one that you didn't expect to have to build. And we need to make sure that everything that we can do in our power, that these resources are getting out the door. And I think it will also inform us in the future, should there ever be an emergency like the one we're in now, where the federal government provides us with relief funds, especially if they're targeted towards providing relief to renters, that we have the ability to get a program stood up and a program that is effective at getting those resources out the door. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are there any questions from the committee? Clear testimony. Thank you very much. Oh, there, Representative Bradstreet. There we go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being here. I appreciate your bringing this bill forward. I think you said something about reporting to the committee weekly. I'm looking at the bill, unless there's a new rendition of it, it says to report annually. Just wondering what the procedure will be. Thank you.
Yeah, so in reference to the federal funds, the idea would be hopefully to be able to provide the committee with monthly data regarding the federal relief funds, and I think there would be an annual report on the vouchers aspect of the bill.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it.
Speaker. And I see that Senator Hickman has arrived. Are you ready to take over, Senator?
Good morning, everyone. I will catch up a little bit and we'll finish this public hearing. Thank you for pinch hitting Senator Miramont. I'm Craig Hickman. I represent Senate District 14, 11 towns in Southern Kennebec County, including my hometown of Withram, which today is celebrating its 250th birthday.
Wow, amazing. And I also see that Representative Gear is here, so if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you. I guess, what do I call you? Temporary Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Gear.
Better than some things I get called. So.
I represent House District 9, which is Kennebunkport and Coastal Biddeford and Kennebunk.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else who didn't introduce themselves, but if you didn't get to jump in, no. Okay. Next, we have Mr. Payne, Greg Payne, in favor of LD 1464. Welcome, Mr. Payne, and go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Senator Miramont. I appreciate it. And good morning, Senator Hickman and Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Greg Payne. I am the director of the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition. We strongly support this bill. We appreciate the speaker's work in bringing this bill forward. And the reason we support it is because we believe that sound public policy kind of comes from the data, and we learn from the data and build policy off of that. And this is a bit of a black hole in our work around federal housing vouchers right now. The first part of this bill, as the speaker referenced, is about the Section 8 program, the Federal Housing Choice Voucher Program. And we just have this lack of information about why people struggle sometimes to lease up an apartment with the vouchers once they finally get one. And that matters a great deal. Obviously, we want to look at success rates. You've heard a lot of conversation in this session, in this committee, about how helpful it would be to have a state rental assistance program. And it would seem to make some sense that as we further those conversations, we look at the challenges that the federal Section 8 program has right now and learn from them, because I think these problems are probably different in different parts of the state. And it matters a great deal that we understand how widespread discrimination is, that we understand if people are having a hard time leasing up their vouchers, Is it because the payment standard should be increased slightly? Would that solve the problem? Again, as the speaker referenced, we're simply just not asking people this question. And so I think certainly a good place to start might be convening practitioners to talk about the best way to get this data, because it does matter and it can help inform your deliberations going forward about how to improve on the usage of important federal rental assistance. The second piece of this bill touches on rent relief. I think I agree with the speaker's comments that this is hard. No one is saying that the folks who are administering this aren't working hard at it. But there's a lot of frustration that we hear from tenants directly about how long it's taking. And the data that's available publicly right now doesn't get into how long it's taking, and importantly, why. And I feel like the legislature may be in a good position to offer assistance to folks who are working on this program to help make sure that tenants and landlords have access to this rent relief program. I think that both of these pieces would add valuable information to the conversation about how to address our housing problems. I think having more data is always helpful, and I appreciate the speaker bringing this bill forward. So I will stop right there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne, and Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Payne. I guess we're looking to ask just one question. Is that it? And also, there's nothing in law that allows the different housing authorities to ask that now without legislation?
Right. Actually, I think that fundamentally it's when folks are unable to use their voucher, I think there's a brief conversation that would need to happen with those people to say, okay, you weren't able to use it. That's a real shame. That's a problem. Why? And obviously that may be more than a one-word answer. There's, obviously I would imagine a 5-minute conversation is all it would take to really understand what happened with them and why they had to turn their voucher back in. There is absolutely nothing that would prevent housing authorities from doing this right now. I think piecemeal here and there, some local housing authorities, in fact, have tried to do this, but there's never been any kind of coordinated statewide effort to do it that's been shared publicly. It's a black hole nationally, frankly, and it's important information to get. So nothing would prevent it. And I think it's great to have the legislature working with local housing authorities across the state to just get this information so we can improve on this program and help it be more successful.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mr. Payne, for your testimony. My question has to do with what is the process currently? Is there a form that needs to be filled out when they bring the voucher back? Is it just, here's the voucher and they walk out the door? Is there any kind of a specific process that's followed?
I think that process doesn't look the same for everybody. I think there are some people who simply, what happens is there's a certain amount of time that that voucher holders have to lease up. And then they typically go back if they can't find an apartment in that time, they go back to the housing authority and say, hey, I need more time, and they can get an extension. They can often get a second extension. But when they reach that final extension, sometimes they just disappear. And, the housing authority has to then say, okay, well, I guess they gave up. Sometimes I think they communicate, I think more often, but, maybe housing authorities can talk about that. More often they communicate to say, I still couldn't do it even after all this time. But there's no then kind of formal part of that conversation where the housing authority says, well, that stinks. Let's talk about why so that we can work on fixing it going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Senator. This is my first year on labor and housing, and I've learned a lot so far. Hope to learn a lot more, especially about housing. One thing I learned early in housing was that a lot of the Southern Maine housing authorities have navigators that actually work, individually with people to help find housing. Calling around my area, which is the Old Town area, they don't use navigators. In fact, They just have somebody in the housing authority that is available if they need help. So basically, they're leaving it on the people's shoulders to find their own place. Do you see in your experience that we need to have more navigators statewide, not just, in local large city areas?
Yeah, thanks, Representative Drinkwater. I think you've hit on something that kind of across the board, I think people embrace the value of navigators and have seen them to be extremely helpful. I think there may be a couple other people testifying who have worked specifically with those navigators and can speak more comprehensively about them. But I will say, everybody that I've been in conversation with about the navigator piece finds them to be valuable. I think that most of us would suggest that those should be available to the extent there's resources to do it in housing authority statewide, not just in Southern Maine.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Payne. I don't see any more questions, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, that was the only person we had listed as a proponent. And now we have Amanda Olson next, please, as opposed.
Just had to find
There you are. Hello, Ms. Olson.
Senator Miramont, Representative Sylvester, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Amanda Olson. I'm currently serving as the Executive Director of Augusta Housing Authority, and I'm here today representing the Maine Association of Public Housing Directors. The Maine Association of Public Housing Directors is comprised of executive directors from Maine's more than 20 housing authorities. Together, we address the need for affordable housing through diverse strategies and housing programs that include the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is part of the bill that we're talking about today, the first component of that bill. I'm testifying today in opposition to LD 1464. The bill before the committee creates a duplicative reporting requirement and an undue and costly burden on Maine's public housing authorities. We agree that access to housing data is important and would like to ensure that the committee is aware of the federal Department of Housing and Urban Development's new Housing Choice Voucher data dashboard, which is something that offers real-time instant access to data relating to voucher utilization for the state of Maine as a whole and individual housing authorities within the state. I provided a link to that tool in my written testimony. To comply with the additional reporting requirements that are outlined in the proposed bill before you would come with a significant price tag to Maine housing authorities. We are already overburdened and underfunded due to prorated administrative fees at the federal level. This is a proration that's been long-standing. We've been funded at about 80% or less for many years compared to the 100% level it would take to adequately administer this program. And we have just found that any additional reporting requirements really take away from our ability to serve Maine people. And in this case, in doing so, we'd be providing information that we already know about and have access to. The bill before you asks for reporting of reasons why vouchers were not used. We just wanted to note that in 2020, Maine housing authorities used 101.36% of our budget authority to lease a total of 11,732 vouchers. This means that together we used all available budget authority and some additional reserve funding. So we just want you to know that there were no unused funds for this rental assistance program. While we used all funding available, this amount was only able to support 89% of available vouchers that are under contract with HUD across the state. And this is largely due to the fact that housing authorities can't afford to support 100% leasing of vouchers due to significantly increased per unit costs resulting from increasing housing costs statewide or a lack of affordable housing. And the subsidy rate at the federal level has not kept pace with the increase in cost of housing. We also wanted to mention that in 2020, in a spirit really similar to that of this bill, the Maine Association of Public Housing Directors conducted a statewide study to determine the reason for any voucher expirations, which is what the first portion of the bill is talking about. And really did that in a way similar to that proposed in LD 1464. We set out on this project together with the best of intentions, but in practical reality, we found that the process was extremely labor intensive for staff, took away time from our ability to help those we serve, and resulted in minimal data.
Ms. Olson, I
yes.
apologize. Your 3 minutes are up. If you could
Okay.
wrap up your thoughts, please.
Sure. Yeah. So basically what we learned is that what we already knew, that there's a lack of affordable housing. To summarize, we oppose this bill. This additional reporting requirement would provide no additional benefit in terms of new data and would place an expensive and undue administrative burden on Maine housing authorities in a way that would take time away from those we serve and hurt Maine people.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Are there any questions for, yes, Representative Cuddy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the testimony, Ms. Olson. The tool that you referenced in your written testimony, in your verbal testimony, does this tool provide all the information that we're talking about trying to gather in a report format?
So the component that it doesn't speak to is if a voucher expires, it doesn't provide the specific reason why each voucher expires. However, in the statewide study that we conducted in 2020, we determined that for a large percentage of folks with vouchers expiring, it's difficult to contact them at the point of voucher expiration, and that for those that we were able to discern the problem, that it was due to what we already know, which is a lack of affordable housing inventory, or landlords not being willing to accept a Section 8 voucher, which we hope will be addressed through LD 1180.
Thank you.
Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Ms. Olson. So just for my own understanding, am I understanding you to say that the number one problem is lack of affordable housing? And if I'm incorrect or correct, could you tell me what you think are the 3 most urgent problems to get people into housing?
Well, I would say you're correct that the number one issue that we're seeing is lack of affordable inventory. I would say an equally important issue is that for the voucher program, the federal subsidy rate that we're receiving per unit, which we refer to as a payment standard, is not adequate to support what we see as market rents in communities across Maine. That's an equally large issue. And then third would be landlords who simply are not willing to accept a Section 8 voucher. And again, we're very hopeful that that could be addressed through LD 1180.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Representative Cuddy.
Thanks, Senator. Sort of piggybacking on the response you just gave to Representative Drinkwater, you said in your testimony that you were utilizing more than your budget authority. It was 101 point something percent in reserve funds. But it sounded like you were also saying that not all vouchers are being used. And was I correct in my understanding of that? And B, that is addressed by, it sounds like, what you just stated at the end of that last answer, that because market rents are going up so fast, the voucher that was given is costing housing authorities more than they expected. Is that correct?
That's correct. So annually, HUD provides every housing authority with a budget authority and also a contract for a certain number of vouchers. And so in Maine, we have over 13,000 vouchers statewide under contract with the Housing and Urban Development Department. However, the budget authority is inadequate for us to lease up the full amount of vouchers under contract due to the increasing rents that we're seeing in the market statewide.
Could I get a follow-up, Senator?
Certainly.
Thank you. So I'm not unfamiliar with how vouchers work directly. Is a voucher for a percentage of the rent, or is it a hard dollar figure? How does a voucher work for an individual who's trying to use one?
Right. So The way it works is that a family would be allowed a certain bedroom size voucher based on their family composition. So for example, if you are a single person, you would be allowed a 1-bedroom voucher. And for each bedroom size, there's a payment standard associated with the bedroom size based on the geographic area or jurisdiction in which the person will be leasing up. And so that payment standard is really what dictates what the person can afford. And then within that, the family would be paying between 30 and 40% of their adjusted income towards rent, with subsidy making up the difference.
So that's why the higher market rent would then drive up the value of the voucher, reducing your ability to actually meet all the vouchers that got put out, possibly.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Olson. I don't see any other questions, so thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to Christopher LaRoche, please.
Good morning, Senator Hickman and Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Christopher LaRoche. I'm the Executive Director of Westbrook Housing Authority and a resident of Alfred, Maine. Westbrook Housing Authority is a public housing authority, which we are the 3rd largest housing authority in the state of Maine, behind Maine State Housing Authority and Portland Housing Authority, with the issuance of 1,011 housing choice vouchers. Our territory is the city of, or jurisdiction is the city of Westbrook and those communities 10 miles beyond per Maine statute Title 30A, including Cumberland County and some of York County. The Westbrook Housing Authority is in opposition to this bill. I have much of the data that was just presented to you by Ms. Olson. Primarily, the first statement is that Westbrook Housing Authority, South Portland Housing Authority, and Portland Housing Authority back in 2013 developed the statewide combined wait list. So with that being said, we not only developed that, we developed that at our own expense. That is now within the state as really used by all housing authorities, which was the intent from a voluntary standpoint of view early on. One of the reasons for the development of that not only was the convenience of the constituents of the state, but to better utilize the voucher program, but also to collect data. So I am not in opposition to collecting data. As a matter of fact, I have vouchers that I've been issued that I've been monitoring, and we have issued 278 vouchers to fill 58 vouchers. About 40% of those vouchers have gone underutilized, or response to those vouchers have gone unutilized because people do not respond to our sending out the request for them to for information so we can give them vouchers. But with that being said, I validate that information Ms. Olson gave, that HUD does provide the 2 websites for real-time data, the HUD dashboard, which to answer the question right now, the average per unit cost for housing authorities in the state of Maine is $659.11 subsidy. In addition, that there is also a second accessible website by HUD, which is called the 2-Year Tool, where any constituent can look for information from each housing authority. The cost of this is burdensome to each housing authority. Most housing authorities are prorated by 20 to 25%. Westbrook Housing Authority has been 99.9% voucher utilized and 98.5% since 2014. We have made investment for an additional person so that we can issue vouchers. That cost is $61,500. We're fortunate to be able to afford that, but we are stretched thin. All housing authorities are operating at less than what the Congress is supposed to be budgeting for them, cannot afford it.
Mr. LaRoche, that's your 3 minutes are up, sir, if you can summarize. Or if you nailed it right at 3 minutes, then well done, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. Any questions from the committee? Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Senator. So the bill sponsor says we need data. And what I'm hearing from you and Ms. Olson is there's plenty of data available. So where do you think the log jam is it Maine State Housing not collecting the data from the housing authorities? Or is it not having an annual meeting? Where do you think the log jam is?
Well, it's not so much a log jam, Representative Drinkwater, is that it's the time and the staffing to collect data. We're able to collect data when the vouchers are issued, and we follow all housing authorities, track those vouchers. But for many times when we have constituents drop off, we're unable to get the information. So in the time it's spent for our staff to collect this data, that was 2 + 3 weeks of time that was lost for staff to get vouchers issued on the street. So it's just a time constraint. It's not Maine Housing's jurisdiction to collect that data from us. We all participated in 2020 in a voluntary study to collect this data, and it confirmed 3 things. One, that there's just not enough affordable housing. This is an issue that we've been dealing with since 1987 in the state of Maine. Second is that the housing costs exceed the HUD fair market rental rates. Therefore, even if we had the ability to get all the vouchers on the street, we don't have the money to pay for them. So there's that roughly 11% loss in voucher utilization. If I took that, just to do a little bit of math for you, is that the attrition rate is about 7%. So if I deduct that off of the 100%, that brings me down to about 93%. So at any given time, we're about 4% underutilized based upon the turn and the amount of money. And that is always going to be a catch up. As far as capacity, from the time you get the voucher information and you process. I will say this, since COVID-19 happened in March of last year, many housing authorities have people working remotely, or the people who are responding to them are working remotely. What normally would take a few days to get information, whether it's from a state agency or an employer, now takes weeks to process. And the burden on staff normally is tremendous, but with COVID, it's that much more so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Representative Gear.
Thank you, Senator Mearmont. You had mentioned that there were 40%, correct me if I misheard this, of vouchers unutilized because people don't respond. So I just want to make sure I understand that correctly. You're saying you're sending out notification to someone on the waiting list and saying, hey, there's a voucher available. And you're just, for 40% of those, you're just not hearing anything back. Is that correct?
That is correct, Representative. So this is from Westbrook Housing. We've been tracking this information where we have what's called mainstream 811 vouchers, which were issued to us from HUD. And these came to us last year. So I have 58 vouchers. To fill those 58 vouchers, we have contacted 278 people off the combined waiting list. Out of those people, I have 39% with no response, as well as I have another 12% who define themselves not interested at this time. So out of that 278, I really have a 51% non-response rate, or 39 no response and 12% not interested.
And just a quick follow-on, if I may.
Certainly.
And so do you have a sense of those folks being contacted, how long they have been on the waiting list? And is that attrition, the longer people are on the waiting list, it's likely that they've found other arrangements or moved on? Do you have a sense of how that waiting list process might impact response rates?
I don't have that data for you at the moment, but I can say that the waiting list was up. Some of those people could have been on for years, 10, 15 years. So in 2019, we were pulling people off for those vouchers who had been on since 2011, 2010. However, that wait list was purged and updated 3 years ago. It's currently undergoing a purge at this time. So that information will be fresh in about another 60 to 90 days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no other questions. Thank you all. And that will close the public hearing on LD 1464. A work session will be set up and you'll be notified of that date as soon as we do, as soon as we know, and can let you know. Okay, we're going to move on to LD 1312.
Thank you, Senator. I will, we can pass the baton now. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Welcome back from your celebratory events and thanks for taking it back.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. So we will now open the public hearing on LD 1312, an act to remove barriers to accessory dwelling units and allow accessory dwelling units where single family houses are allowed, presented by Representative Valley Geiger of Rockland. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Senate Chair Hickman, House Chair Sylvester, Representative Cuddy, and the honorable members of the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Valley Geiger. I'm representative for District 93, Rockland and Owl's Head, and the sponsor of LD 1312, an act to remove barriers to accessory dwelling units and allow accessory dwelling units where single family homes are allowed. As you all know, most of Maine has an acute housing shortage. The median price of a home in Maine has increased 55% in the last decade due to short supply and high demand. In the last 5 years, the majority of Maine households have become unable to afford the median home sales price. Over the last 20 years, the majority of Maine households are unable to afford the median price for a 2-bedroom apartment. 30,000 Mainers are on waiting lists to gain access to an affordable housing unit in the state. 250 new affordable housing units are created each year. 1,000 are needed. 15 out of 16 counties have an affordable housing crisis. In Midcoast Maine, where I live, the need is particularly acute. The Midcoast Regional Planning Commission at a Chamber of Commerce meeting this past fall stated that the biggest barrier to workforce recruitment was a lack of housing. Maine, in passing this bill, would not be alone. California, Florida, New Hampshire, Oregon, Vermont, and Rhode Island, in response to the acute shortage of affordable housing, now allow an ADU on a single-family house lot. Allowing ADUs will enable Maine to increase the number of housing units without using public money. Allowing one ADU on a single-family house lot increases that lot's value, returns sovereignty to a homeowner, allows those on a fixed income to have a source of additional income to cover things like their property taxes, while providing additional housing in their community. It allows families to keep aging loved ones, adult disabled children near, yet with independence. And 41% of Mainers over 60 and 31% of all Mainers live alone. ADUs allow aging seniors to move to smaller spaces, freeing up square footage for larger households. Will a broad ADU statute alone fix the housing shortage? No. In housing, like in other complex problems, we enter what's called the rule of 3%. In medicine, when you are treating hypertension, we find that one medication decreases blood pressure by 3%. The lowering of salt, another 3%. Walking daily, 3%. Decreasing alcohol intake, 3%. Increasing intake of fruits and vegetables, 3%. Each small effort creates a small effect, but many small efforts creates a large effect. That is true too with housing solutions. We are facing a perfect storm in both acute workforce needs and acute housing shortages. This is one of the few bills in the 130th session that will actually increase the number of housing units. We have sudden, sharp increases in house valuations, accompanied by a legislative disinclination to return 5% of the municipal revenue sharing back to towns and cities, and a refusal to fund all school districts at 55% of education costs, which means that an increasing burden falls to residential property tax payers, many of whom, in response, are being forced out of their homes. The designation of Maine as the oldest state in the nation is accompanied by a higher death rate than birth rate, necessitating that Maine look to bringing people to Maine from other places. An acute shortage of workers in most fields is made more acute by the inability to find workforce affordable housing. Maine Health recently estimated to me that 50% of the new nurses they were able to recruit in the Med Coast over the last 2 years did not stay due to an inability to find affordable housing. Thank you for allowing me to appear before you today, and I am happy to take any questions. In looking at my testimony, I realize I'm assuming everybody knows what an ADU is, so I'm certainly happy to answer more questions about what they are and how they work.
Thank you, Representative Geiger, for your presentation of your bill. Are there any questions from the committee or the bill sponsor? I will take you up on the offer to explain what that is.
Certainly. So an ADU, or an accessory dwelling unit, is essentially a small guest house on a piece of property. This is an old tradition. It's nothing new. It's been in our history forever. People often built attached or detached small units on their land to house relatives, friends. But over time, that became zoning rules sort of tightened up. And in most places now, an accessory dwelling unit is not allowed. I'm receiving calls from constituents all the time, running up against this barrier. For example, a middle school teacher who moved back to Maine because her father was growing older. They had hoped to build an ADU on her father's property so that her dad could move into it and the family could move into the larger house. Not allowed. I have had conversations with young adults who moved back home but need their own space and hope to build a small ADU on their parents' property. Not allowed. I talked to many elderly who are unable to afford increasing property tax over time, but don't want to leave their community and don't want to leave their property. An ADU would allow them the flexibility to either move into the ADU themselves and rent their larger house, or rent the ADU and therefore be able to afford the property tax that their community requires. So it's a small house. Most of them are somewhere between 750 and 800 square feet. In fact, that is an omission of my bill. I failed to see that the revisers had taken that out. I had in there set no larger than 750 square feet. So it's a small house. It needs to meet design standards. It needs to meet all MUBEC housing requirements, including energy requirements.
And can you tell us why they are no longer allowed by zoning?
What we have seen over time is that most of the housing that we, those of us who live in more urban areas, enjoy, our neighborhoods, could not be built today. For example, if you go through Rockland's historic neighborhoods, you couldn't duplicate them now. Now we require a housing road frontage of 100 feet rather than 50 feet. Now we require much larger houses than many of the houses in our neighborhoods currently are. We now require much larger lot sizes with much larger side, front, and back setbacks, so that we often find that trying to turn a garage into a small apartment for a relative is no longer possible because the garage doesn't meet current setbacks, current size. So we've just made somewhere there became an interest in preventing any additional infill, an interest in maintaining the largest houses we could on a lot, to the detriment of our communities, I think. Particularly now, over the last, we've had 2 recessions. With COVID-19, we are seeing many young millennials failing to be able to launch, and people are returning home, and we're making that very difficult for them.
Thank you. Representative Bradstreet has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. This is an interesting subject. I used to be in the housing business, and at one point in time, I had a person who wanted their elderly parents to live next to them in a unit such as some of the one you just described. And I'm wondering is there any consideration to making these things temporary? Because this would have been a temporary unit, would have been there until their elderly parents no longer needed it. Has that ever been considered? And with today's technology, things like that can be done.
Well, I guess I would say is that it is not inexpensive to build even a small unit now, and to make that unit only temporarily able to house someone is to waste a resource that we are desperate in the state of Maine to increase. I'll give you an anecdotal story. One of the housing conferences I went to, there was a Maine architect who, when he bought his colonial in a historic district, built an accessory dwelling unit for his in-laws, 800 square feet. They lived there for 20 years, helped raise his children. His family then took care of them as they aged. When they died, he turned it into a long-term rental because his twin sons were entering college and helped pay the tuition. When they graduated, he turned it into an office space for him for a couple of years. And now, the last I had heard, was looking to put his disabled daughter into that house where she would have her own independence and yet still be close to her parents. So over time, those units can be adapted to anything over the course of a householder's life, to meet the need of relatives, to meet the need for additional income. So I would hate to see a temporary an allowance in something that, you know, is a precious resource.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair.
May proceed.
Thank you. Well, what if they could be then transported elsewhere and reused for the same purpose? Would that change your outlook on it?
Maybe. Currently in Maine, we don't allow tiny houses on wheels. Most municipalities, this bill would not allow them. It's certainly something I think your committee particularly needs to look at all options, every range, to increase the number of housing units in our state.
Senator Miramont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Representative. Thanks for being here. You've been very passionate about this for a long time and educated me, and I appreciated that. So it seems like in a place like Rockland, you're really solving a couple of problems, and we're desperate for the housing and affordable housing again, which used to be the place that everybody went for it. But now, not only is that short, but the tax base has nowhere to grow. So if we allowed this and one was built, it would go on to the tax rolls of that property, would it not, at the same full rate? It's no exception for that, right? It just increases the value and brings the tax base up in a confined space like the city of Rockland.
That is true.
Okay.
Any ADU built on a piece of property would increase the value of that property. Therefore, expanding the tax base in what for Rockland is a very small landmass, while also increasing housing and giving options for the many people in our state who are struggling, particularly in Rockland, to manage the rising property valuation accompanied with the rising property tax.
Thank you.
Representative Geer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for bringing this bill, Representative Geiger. As someone who personally benefits from having elderly parents around, there's also a very personal benefit that people gain from helping their elderly parents as they age and move on. So I love this idea. And I will say the question that I have is that I know you're very tied in with your local government, and clearly these situations have come up and are being considered. And I'm curious as to what the objections are to, allowing some changes to zoning or whatever to let them happen. What are the main objections that are being raised against this as an approach?
Happy to answer that. Thank you, Representative Geer. So just to give you some background, places like Gorham, Maine, Belfast, Maine, have made this change years ago. It has not fundamentally changed their neighborhoods. There has not been a disaster of sheds, people living in sheds on private property. And those are some of the fears. I worked in Rockland for 6 years as a city councilor, trying to pass an ordinance to allow detached accessory dwelling units. And the amount of fear was surprising to me, and the amount of resistance was frankly very disappointing. For many people, it was, I have mine, I like the neighborhood exactly the way it is, I don't want it to change, and I don't want to see anything added to it. A lot of people are concerned about infill, even though if we look, the majority of households have 2 or less people in them. 50 years ago, those same neighborhoods were full of kids, parents, aging parents. So we're not looking at increasing our population in those neighborhoods. Those populations have been declining for decades, but that is the fear. The fear is that it won't look good, that it won't meet standards, that it will increase density, noise, need for parking, and mainly it appears to be just a resistance to change. I don't want my neighborhood to change in any way. There has been concern expressed about property values, but in other states and in other towns where an ADU has been added, it actually adds value. And historic districts are protected because, particularly in this bill, it requires that there be design standards so that that smaller house must match the larger house it is sitting on the property with.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you very much for presenting this work today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Next up is Nancy Smith from GrowSmart, who will be testifying in favor of the bill. Followed by Kate Dufour, who will be testifying in opposition to the bill. And I'm going to ask, I see Eric Jorgensen's got his hand up. Are you interested in testifying on this bill, sir? I am allowing you to talk. Mr. Jorgensen, are you there? Are you here to testify on this bill or just on the ones you've signed up for?
Thank you. No, it was actually for the last bill, and I apologize for that. I got it in late, and I put my hand up, but it ended. So I can talk about the last bill at some other time, but I'll be talking later. I love this bill. I just say that, but I'm not going to talk about it. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. Welcome, Nancy Smith.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Committee on Housing and Labor. I'm Nancy Smith, Executive Director of GrowSmart Maine. This morning, I'm presenting testimony to you from one of my board members, Lynn Seeley, who is a community planner who lives in Yarmouth. She brings a great deal of expertise to this, as you'll see. Her testimony was submitted on Friday. Hopefully you have the written testimony in front of you. The need for housing, as you heard from the sponsor, has been and evermore continues to be an issue that communities wrestle with. GrowSmart Maine views accessory dwelling units as a valuable component of a community's effort to provide housing choices. As you heard, ADUs offer a relatively straightforward, affordable option for accommodating housing needs that evolve from starter homes to aging in place over a lifetime. Lynn Seeley actually created a community guide that you can find on GrowSmart Maine's website about ADUs, and also a summary of ordinances. This was done in November of 2015. At that point, 20 municipalities already had ADU ordinances in place. We support the intention of the bill to allow ADUs in all municipalities where single residential use is allowed. That said, this may create resistance from municipalities as a mandate. Looking online this morning, I saw that with Bar Harbor's testimony. We have specific recommendations, 5 of them. First, could this bill be adapted to apply only where a municipality does not already have an AUD ordinance in place? This would accommodate the existing working ADU provisions while setting a statewide standard. Secondly, the definition for ADUs is very open-ended. The committee may want to clarify the intent and meaning of accessory. The bill disallows towns and cities from prohibiting certain uses. I found this double negative really hard in working my way through and hope that the committee is able to work with it more smoothly than I was. On section 2B regarding setbacks, our recommendation is requiring the same setbacks as for the principal or other accessory structures. On section 2D, which disallows requiring owner occupancy, we recommend removing this language. It is an important provision that helps garner support for ADUs, and owner's presence provides even a sense of stability, even if it's only a perception. And finally, section 2E, which addresses short-term rentals. We recommend removing this language. Many existing ADU ordinances address this in one way or another, having worked through what's best for that situation. Thank you for the opportunity to present Lynn Seeley's testimony, and I'm happy to bring back to her any questions that you may have in time for the work session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Are there any questions? Senator Miramont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm surprised by the setback part. That may be a stumbling block to the whole thing. I think that you said you've looked at this and talked about it. How do you think that keeping setbacks that make for tough use of a lot would help this situation?
I think we get caught in the double negative thing. Municipalities are prohibited from prohibiting certain things. The current bill as it's written, I think, requires a 20 or 25-foot setback. Our recommendation, because that's larger than before, I don't have that bill up, be actually just to accommodate what the current setbacks are. So we're just suggesting that the setbacks be the same as they are for the house and any other structures.
Representative Cuddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ooh, yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony, ma'am. The question that you might bring back to your board member who brought it forth was, for me, there were a number of the parts of the bill that you suggested be removed because it might interfere with an ADU ordinance already in place. But if we were to amend the bill as was originally suggested, to set a statewide standard, but if a municipality has their own ADU ordinance that would supersede it, it sounds like we wouldn't need to remove the pieces of the bill or the pieces of the current legislation before us, because we would be allowing for the ADU statutes already in place to supersede it. That's the question I would like for you to bring back to her.
We can have a conversation to clarify, but my sense is that even if you were to grandfather the existing ones, there are still concerns about the provisions that we brought forward. Again, with owner occupied, that really does give a perception, at the very least, of stability, and a lot of the concerns based on the perception of ADUs, as you heard from the sponsor, would be minimized if there were an owner occupying either of those two. And the short-term rentals, we'll get back to you on where that were if we were to grandfather the current ADUs, the current provisions. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Nancy Smith from the committee? Seeing none. Representative Geiger, I see that your hand is up. It would be out of order for me to call upon you since you've already presented your bill. So if you would like to respond to anything that you hear, please take note of that and submit those concerns to us for the work session. You will certainly be invited to be at the work session and participate. Okay? Thank you. Next up is Kate Dufour from the Maine Municipal Association.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Cuddy, and members of the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Kate Dufour, and I'm here on behalf of the Maine Municipal Association to provide testimony in opposition to LD 1312. Municipal officials strongly oppose LD 1312 because, simply put, it's an erosion of local control and the rights of residents to decide how best to encourage development within their municipal boundaries. As proposed in LD 1312, all local level efforts to adopt ordinances that protect each owner's property interest will no longer apply in areas of a municipality where single-family housing is authorized. Property owners, whether residents or not, would be allowed to ignore setbacks and height restrictions, thereby allowing these structures to infringe on the privacy of neighbors and restrict the views of others in communities. All investments municipalities have made to ensure the proper management of stormwater runoff necessary to protect natural resources would be at risk. All traffic, noise, density, parking, and other limitations, which apply in other areas of the community, would be null and void in residential neighborhoods. The approach proposed in the bill would, in a blink of an eye, dismiss the hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars municipal officials and volunteers have put into perfecting ordinances and redrafting comprehensive plans. Municipal officials also object to the provision of the bill which restricts municipalities from prohibiting these units from being used as short-term or vacation rentals. If the intent of the legislation is to increase access to affordable and workforce housing, then this prohibition is at odds with the underlying policy. Finally, if enacted, municipal officials will be left on their own to manage the public relations nightmare associated with the implementation of this unwelcome state policy. While municipal officials from urban, suburban, and rural communities are well aware of the state's housing issues, the solution proposed in LD 1312 is too severe and an infringement on the development priorities of each municipality. A change of this nature has the potential to upend the social contract that is created when ordinances are developed in a give and take manner to maintain balance among the interest of all parties. Rather than eroding local level efforts, the legislature should find ways to incentivize communities to take a look at their policies and ordinances to determine for themselves if change is necessary. I thank you for your time and consideration, and will answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Four. Representative Pebworth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Four, for being here. I have two questions for you. One is, I'd like to hear your response to Lynn Seeley's testimony, if you've had a chance to look at that and see if the changes suggested there would make it more amenable to municipalities, in your opinion. And if you had ideas about how to incentivize municipalities to making changes. Thank you.
I haven't taken a look at Ms. Seeley's testimony, but I think the issue is we are a very diverse state. I mean, you can have communities that abut each other and they have different policy priorities. And I think to the extent that we try to develop one size fits all approaches, they just don't work. So, what works in Madawaska, that's my hometown, so I feel okay calling it Madtown, is not necessarily going to work in Hollowell. It's not going to work in Old Orchard. So that flexibility is absolutely necessary. And I think when it comes to the second question, the incentives, I don't know what those incentives might be, but we need to understand that it's not, the 3, 5, or 7 members of a board or a council that are making all these decisions. It's the population that's behind them that has needs. And it's a way for encouraging residents in our community to say, this is not a bad idea. This might be good for us. So I guess I'm talking myself into what we need. It might be resources. It might be education. It might be information that we can use to say, hey, here's a potential for increasing access to affordable housing or workforce housing in our communities. This is one way to do it. I mean, I think it harkens back to when we had a state planning office that was really working with municipalities. Prior to the state planning office starting to judge the work of municipalities, they were an incredible resource. You could turn to those state planning office and say, listen, we got this particular issue or problem in our community. Help us figure out how to solve it. So I would say resources, education, and an ability to work with members of our community to identify, what the issues are and how we can address them.
Thank you.
Representative Warren has a question.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your testimony. For my clarity, is it your experience and judgment that we just haven't done enough to incentivize this at the local level, or are you making a more, principled argument about that even if it were a very effective way to achieve a given policy outcome, that it just shouldn't be possible, and it's just principally wrong? Like if we went about incentivizing maybe in a way that you would be, in your perspective, we haven't done, that may be a more or less effective way, but we just shouldn't have this as part of our toolkit, I guess, to address this big issue.
If I understand your question correctly, we want tools in our toolkit in order to advance public policies or priorities that are of interest or a priority for the community. So we're not saying no. I mean, we understand that affordable and workplace housing is incredibly important. So it's not the no, it's the mandate. It is that one size fits all. We are state government. We know what's best for every community in the state of Maine. That's really what sets us off. So to the extent that tools are provided and municipalities can come to it when they are ready to get to that point, that's what we're looking for. Partnership. We want to partner with the state to advance policies, but understanding that not every community is the same. And we need to figure out how best to provide everybody the tools and the education they need to make decisions that are best for them, for their communities. If that answers.
Could I ask a follow-up just for clarification?
Sure.
Thank you. So are you saying that we just shouldn't be putting this mandate ever? Or are you making an argument more just practically that we haven't done enough as a state to incentivize this stuff, that's a better way of addressing this?
Yeah, we don't want the mandate, but you're absolutely right. To the extent that you want to provide incentives to achieve a state level priority, that's our preferred mechanism for achieving that. If this is your idea, incentivize communities.
Okay, and is it your, oh, I'm sorry. That's all, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for being here, Ms. Dufour. Following that same line of questioning, other states have set targets for affordable and attainable housing in communities, and then have incentivized that against that target, leaving it up to the municipalities to determine how they meet that target, but you still are focused on meeting the target, because the issue is, how do you solve the problem if no one is really incentivized to do anything? So I guess I would just ask you, would you be supportive of a state goal and then incentives that go with that goal, leaving it up to the municipalities to then determine how best to achieve that goal?
I guess, I mean, if at the end of the day, you have the carrot and there's a stick waiting to hit a community, I would say no. We are being asked to, every other committee, all your colleagues and other committees are asking communities to set goals and meet these goals. I mean, if you think about the climate action change, there's many, many goals that communities are going to be asked to achieve within certain time limits. There is so much pressure on local government to achieve all these priorities. And when that happens, when the state starts saying, here are the 5 priorities or 10 priorities or 2 priorities that we want you to meet, what communities desire take the back burner. I mean, because there's only so many resources available to a community. And I'm talking about property taxes. So, you pay your school bills, you pay your county bills, you fulfill all your state mandates. There's not much left. So every time the state says, okay, here's one more priority for you to meet, that's something else that the community can achieve, something that the residents of the community want. So I think our preference would be incentives all the way around, not this target that, what would be the consequence if a municipality didn't meet the target? Loss of revenue sharing, loss of school aid. I mean, I guess that would have to be fleshed out a bit as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? I think I wonder if, I know we are a strong home rule state, and I firmly believe in it, but I also know that the state does have to have some policies that municipalities opt into. Is there a way, you think, to salvage some part of this bill with an opt-in so that it's not just about the mandate, but that there is an overarching policy of the state that we are asking municipalities to consider the next time they go about updating an ordinance of some kind?
I mean, to the extent that it remains an opt-in or opt-out, that's fine. But once something is on the books, it's easy to change. That a voluntary action becomes a mandate within a few years. So that would be one of the concerns. Again, I think we would prefer a system of incentives that does not include a stick at the end of or some sort of punishment associated with not meeting that policy.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee, Mr. Ford? Seeing none, that is the last person who is signed up to testify on LD 1312. If I don't see any hands from the attendees go up, I will now close the public hearing on LD 1312. I will now open the public hearing on LD 1322, which is a resolve directing the Maine State Housing Authority to allow rental housing owners to apply for emergency rental relief assistance, sponsored by our very own Representative Gary Drinkwater of Milford. That is LD 1322. You are on, sir.
Thank you, Senator Hickman and my fellow colleagues. If there's one thing I've learned from being on this committee is let's get to the point and move on. I'm going to lay this out very simply. I see some problems with this rental assistance program. I think we've all seen that as we've heard testimony from the beginning. So the problem I've heard, problem number one, is tenants not willing to sign the application. I've talked to some landlords and my local housing authority, and the landlord states that some tenants, a few tenants, will not sign the joint application. One of them, from my local housing authority, even acknowledges she can't be evicted but won't sign. Another tenant owes $6,000 in back taxes and refuses to sign. Problem number two is Maine Housing says under the current guidelines, the tenant must sign. Maine Housing is quoting Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. So I guess my question would be, and hopefully I can work with Maine State Housing to find a solution to this problem that we all can agree on, is that the rental assistance, from my understanding, started back in 2020. So maybe those guidelines will dovetail with the latest guidelines. And problem number three is the word's not getting out that rental assistance is available for rentals. We heard earlier last month from a tenant in Kennebunkport, I think that's where she was from, she owned a small business, that she was behind in rent, and the landlord graciously gave her one free month. She didn't know about the rental assistance program. So just to conclude, we need to find a solutions with guidance from Maine State Housing. And there are some people behind me that are also well versed with this problem. And I'm asking the committee to help find a solution so landlords can get paid for the back rent. Because as we all know, if we don't make our payments and utilities, there are repercussions. So with that, I'll conclude. If there's any questions I can answer, I'd be glad to. And I'm sure there's some people behind me that are also well versed in it. So thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Representative Drinkwater. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we have co-sponsor Representative Mark Blyer to testify on this bill. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and esteemed colleagues of the Joint Standings Committee on Labor and Housing. I am Representative Mark Blyer. I represent the people of District 22, which includes Leamington and part of Standish, Buxton, and Limerick. I appear before you today in support of LD 1322, a resolve directing the Maine State Housing Authority to allow rental housing owners to apply for emergency rent relief assistance. It has been a tough year. We all know how COVID-19 has affected each and every one of us. Businesses have been hurt, some have shut down. Thankfully, help such as the forgivable PPP loan program have allowed some businesses to make it through the pandemic. I would like to give credit to for everything that the Maine State Housing Authority has done through organizations like York County Community Action and provide financial help to keep families in their homes. However, we cannot close our eyes to some landlords. Due to the state moratorium on evictions, some landlords face situations where, despite the availability of financial assistance from some families, choose to not apply for aid. This creates a hardships on landlords who are now struggling to pay their mortgage and are at risk of losing everything they have worked their entire lives for. This bill would provide some financial relief to those landlords and enable them to pay their mortgage when tenants choose to not apply for the aid that is available to them. Providing assistance to landlords who are struggling to pay their mortgage due to the lack of rent payments will help those landlords pay their mortgage and consequently help families stay in their homes. On behalf of those families, I would like to ask you to support this bill and it ought to pass. I thank you for the consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative, for your testimony today. Representative Bradstreet has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Byer, for being here. So the landlords are not asking for anything they wouldn't be entitled to should the tenant just follow procedures that are out there. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Representative Bradstreet. That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Representative Byer from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Next up.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, sir. Mr. Eric Jorgensen from Maine State Housing. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. I apologize for my technological problems with the last bill, and I'm very happy to talk about our concerns about 1464, but that's not what this hearing is. I'm here today to talk about 1322. Eric Jorgensen from Maine State Housing Authority. I think that the way this federal program works, it's aimed at making landlords and tenants whole by paying rental arrearages that have arisen from the effects of COVID-19. It's going to pay a landlord for back rent owed for up to 12 months, looking back, and up to 3 months prospectively. There is a requirement, though, in the federal law that both tenants and landlords apply for the program in cooperation. And I think the theory behind that is really just having them apply together forces both parties to agree on the amount owed, helps to reduce the likelihood of fraud. And in cases where a landlord refuses to participate, a tenant can apply in their own. But unfortunately, there's no way for a landlord to apply without a tenant's signature. The law is clear on that. And I do, in my testimony that I've submitted, have a link to the federal statute on that. So I would just say that I totally support, we as Maine Housing support the aims of this bill. We know there have been cases where tenants have refused to participate in the program, leaving landlords without access to this support. But as the administrator of these funds, Maine State Housing Authority is bound to follow the guidance we've been given by the US Treasury, which is clear. And I think that while there haven't been too many documented instances of tenants refusing to participate in the program, we know it's happened, we understand the problem, and we realize that in the world of rental housing, landlords are every bit as important as tenants. One can't exist without the other. So we would also point out, however, that landlords do continue to have remedies, starting with eviction, which remains an option. There is no state eviction moratorium, period. There is a federal eviction moratorium, but in cases where a tenant is not paying rent and not taking advantages of the federal rent relief, that's when it can happen. But frankly, it's our hope that landlords in this situation will appeal to tenants' self-interest under the rent relief program, really because I think every tenant who has lost income from COVID-19 has a chance to have their rent paid in full and to avoid being evicted. And I think evictions have disastrous long-term implications for both the tenant's credit and their ability to find future housing, and also disastrous financial implications for landlords. So I really get this. I'm very reluctant to ever come out against anything from a member of this committee. I really appreciate Representative Drinkwater's interest in housing, his good questions, his collegiality. So we're opposed to this bill, but not because of what it's trying to do. We're just opposed to it because of federal requirements that bind us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen, for your testimony. Representative Cuddy has a question.
Thank you, Senator Hickman, and thank you, Mr. Jorgensen, for your testimony. My memory, and this may be of the original rent relief program, was that when a landlord signed and accepted the program, that they were signing a document that also said they could not evict. If that's the case, and they're, the landlord's willing to sign, but the tenant isn't willing, I think your testimony said that the landlord still did have, unfortunately, the stick option of eviction. They didn't have any way to incentivize really the tenant to take advantage of this program. In my district, I've heard from a lot of landlords who are having problems, but none of them have been that their tenants won't accept it. I've had some tenants whose landlords won't accept it, but it's, if you're not going to accept it, you can still evict. So at least they have a way to move a tenant. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. And, it's the federal, if a tenant has not taken advantage of available rental assistance, that's when they can get, they are subject to be evicted if that's what the landlord wants to do. And again, I think it's been a real problem in the sense that there's an idea that there's a state rental eviction moratorium in place. There isn't. And I think that's just it's a problem. We hear about the eviction thing from, we've heard about it. There's a lot from different people. And I can only say that it's something we're very aware of. I would also say that I'm also concerned about the amount of people that are not hearing about the program. We're very eager to get this information out there. I would be very happy to share at the work session an outline of the publicity that we've done. And we're also we would welcome any other ideas you all have. We continue to push this program out there. So, I think frankly, eviction's a disaster, in every way. I'm a landlord myself and I'm not working here. And anything I can do to prevent that from happening is good for the landlord and good for the tenant. And I just feel that's a really important issue that's maybe a mistake to try to focus on that as opposed to what this program can offer. It's not a great answer, I don't think, but that's the answer I'm going to give you.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen.
Mr. Jorgensen, do you know what the reason is that tenants have to sign off on something that they may not know about or maybe are too ashamed to sign for at the federal level? And is there any movement to change that in federal law?
I think I've heard this. We are in almost constant meetings with HUD about this program with the federal government, with the Treasury about this program, and with our colleagues in other states. And I know this is an issue it comes up all over the place. I think really the issue behind it is that I think the people designing the program felt that the rules were, by having both parties involved, it allowed a clarity of what was involved. Everyone could agree on the amount owed, everyone could agree on everything. And then having both signatures suggested that it wasn't just you couldn't just have a landlord cook up an idea that they were owed rent and have it done without the consent or the involvement of the tenant. And similarly, you couldn't just have a tenant say that I'm way behind in my rent and not go to the landlord. So I think it was really like a counter signature on a check. And I don't think that's, it's proven clunky at times, I think. I know it has. It's made the application for this program harder than the previous rental relief program that was done through the state. But this is that's the guidance we have, unfortunately.
Representative Gear has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here, Mr. Jorgensen. Have you all at Maine State Housing been receiving inquiries from landlords about this situation? And if so, what's the extent of how many and is it happening a lot?
We haven't received too many. It's more of an anecdotal thing. We have heard about it on occasion. This program is mostly being handled by the state community action agencies, the CAPs. So they're the ones that are actually dealing most regularly with the sort of retail side of the program. So not too many comments from landlords have come to us. We have had several landlord forums. We'd have another one anytime anyone wanted us to do it, and tried to answer questions for people about that. I think landlords are actually a great reason they're a great tool for us to help get people aware of this program, and it helps everybody. So we've heard about it, but we haven't heard we don't have documentation on how often it's happening. I don't think it's happening a lot, but for the people where it is happening, it's a real problem. We recognize that.
And just a quick follow on, if I may.
You may.
And are the CAPs able to kind of try to bring the landlord and the tenant together in that situation? Or can they say, hey, let's reach out to the tenant and get them in here and have a conversation? Or is that something they're not allowed to do?
That's a good question. I don't know. I could find that out for the work session if you want. I think there's some authority to do that. I mean, the CAPs have a lot of different stuff they do. They work on fuel assistance. They work on other types of tenant relief for various other programs. And so you know, I think they do have depth, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their flexibility is in that area. I mean, I know the other big issue that we just have to talk about is that the CAPS have had, they've got money to hire more people for this program, but they've had trouble staffing up. We hear that around the whole state. So, you know, it's been, they're pretty strained by this program. And I think that's been an issue. And it's one. So I don't know about that, but I can find out about that.
Thank you.
Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jorgensen, for being here. Given the fact that you are prevented at by federal regulation from, I guess, paying rent when a tenant doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't cooperate, if a landlord should report to you or to Maine Housing that they have a tenant who refuses to pay rent, are you able to send that person, that tenant, a letter stating that, you know, how bad eviction will be for them in the future and that there is no moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent? Are you able to do that?
I think we could do it. I think that's a great question. I don't see any reason why we couldn't. I don't see any reason why we might not. I don't know. I don't think we're doing that, but it's an interesting question. And I think it would be really good to help people understand what happens when you get evicted, because it puts you into a world of hurt as a tenant. I mean, it's not a light thing that happens, and it's terribly damaging to landlords too. So that's a good question. I don't think we've been asked to do that, and that's you know, but it's an idea that would be a good one.
I thought it might clear up some misconceptions at least. So thank you.
And Mr. Jorgensen, following up on that, would that be something that you, the legislature, you would welcome us telling you to do that as part of this resolve?
I don't know if I can speak for the housing authority on that, but I can I can talk to you at the work session about that. You know, it seems like a common sense kind of approach if we could do it. I mean, again, it's the question of staffing and how many there are, but I just can't believe I don't think there's too many cases like this. So it's an interesting question.
Thank you. Senator Guerin has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Jorgensen. I was wondering if it would be possible for the state to apply for a waiver of that federal rule.
I don't know. I don't believe we have that option, but I can look into that.
Perhaps that would be something else we could tell you to do.
Yep. I will, I'm writing it down here and I can provide more, again, I'll provide more information when you guys meet.
Tell the executive branch to do something. Representative Morris has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can, and thank you for being here, Mr. Jorgensen. I can appreciate the your testimony and the sympathy that you have shown for this situation, but can you just kind of discuss sort of the eviction process, especially now in Maine? As I understand it, it's a fairly long process anyway, and there's more of a backlog now, even with evictions being allowed.
Yeah, I don't know the details of it exactly, but I can, again, I'll bring that information to the work session. I mean, it is a process that involves the courts. It's a long process. There are backlogs. It's not an easy process, and it's not gotten any easier in the last year. No question about that. And it's not a remedy that people would choose to do if they had any other option. That's my impression as both a landlord and a former tenant. But I can provide that for you at the work session if that's okay. I just don't want to start opining on something that I'm not really clear on how it works. I've fortunately never had to evict anybody.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Jorgensen from the committee? Seeing none, we will see you again soon, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other people signed up to testify on LD 1322, unless there's an attendee who did not get the invite and came in late. Going once, going twice, I close the public hearing on LD 1322. I will now open the public hearing on LD 1397. An act directing the Maine State Housing Authority to create a commission to develop a comprehensive rental registry for multifamily housing sponsored by Representative Tracy Gear of Kennebunkport.
If I may have a moment, Mr. Chair, I just need to notify someone who's coming to testify.
You may take a moment. We'll be at ease until the notification is made.
Great, all set.
You are on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished colleagues on the Committee on Labor and Housing. I'm Representative Tracy Gear, and I represent House District 9, and I live in Kennebunkport. And I'm here to introduce LD 1397. As the state legislature, we have the opportunity to create self-sustaining systemic change that helps Maine people to have better lives. In some cases, this can be accomplished by giving people access to information that is otherwise hard to obtain. If you look at the private sector, we've seen this happen in many different parts of the marketplace. For example, today when you go to buy a car, you can find details on available cars on Car Gurus or Vroom, and you can look up a particular vehicle's service and accident history on Carfax. Whereas in the past, this type of information was very difficult, if not impossible, to find. We see a similar kind of information gap in the rental housing market. People struggle to find information on available rental housing. They're desperately looking for rentals and turning to social media with posts like, does anybody know of any places for rent? I can't find anything. I don't know what I'm going to do. At times, word of mouth seems the only way to get information. I hear from constituents regularly about their struggles with finding information on rentals. The rental market is opaque, and that makes it difficult for renters to navigate. The goal of LD 1397 is to create a more transparent rental market across the state, where all rental properties are listed in a comprehensive database and there's information about the property, the rental history, and code violations and remediation, including lead abatement data, etc. The database would also include clear information on who the owners, managers, and emergency contact for each unit are, which I understand can be hard to get clarity on with absentee owners, complicated ownership structures, and varying quality and dedication on the part of management companies. This type of database would be a resource for renters and also a tool for cities and municipalities to maintain up-to-date information on and oversight of properties and landlords. Municipalities do not typically have dedicated resources to develop this type of tool, but could benefit from having it available. With such a tool, municipalities could provide better service to their residents, making available the information needed to create a fairer, safer, and more open rental market. Unlike other markets, like car buying or home sales, there's no logical player in the rental housing market with an interest in creating such an information tool. The purpose of LD 1397 is to designate a commission to document the characteristics of a rental registry database, prototype it, and test it in interested municipalities. Ideally, the database could provide user-friendly interfaces for renters looking for property information, for property owners to keep the information on their own units up to date, and for municipalities managing oversight and compliance. Automated updates from code enforcement and other feeds, for example, lead abatement, and other databases, and integrated capabilities like emailing, texting, emergency alerts to facilitate communications between municipalities and property managers. The project envisioned in LD 1397 will start the conversation about how we empower tenants by putting more information in their hands and how we assist municipalities with a tool they can leverage to improve the rental market for their residents. I ask for your support for this initiative. We have some folks coming on to testify who are much more expert in the details of these kinds of the challenge that municipalities face and the opportunity to provide this kind of a tool. And so I would certainly defer to them as we go on with the conversation today, but I'm available and here to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, welcome Representative Cloutier, who will be testifying as a co-sponsor in favor of the bill.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. As you know, I am Kristen Cloutier, and I proudly represent House District 60, part of Lewiston. I am here today in support of LD 1397, an act directing the Maine State Housing Authority to create a commission to develop a comprehensive rental registry for multifamily housing. As a former municipal official from the second largest city in Maine, and one currently undergoing a substantial revitalization, I can speak directly to the positive impact such a registry would have on my district and in my community. In 2018, the city of Lewiston created its own rental registration committee comprised of the Director of Code and Planning, 2 city councilors from opposing ends of the political spectrum, our building plumbing inspector, our fire inspector, a member of our police force, several property owners, and 2 members of the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee. It was a well-rounded group that sought to protect the health and safety of our residents by ensuring the health and safety of our rental properties, and to attract and support property owners who are committed to providing safe and healthy housing. One of the primary reasons for implementing such a registry was the high incidence of childhood lead poisoning resulting from the age and deterioration of our housing stock. As I am sure you are all well aware, lead is a poison that affects virtually every system in the human body and is particularly harmful to the developing brain and nervous system of fetuses and young children. Cities like Lewiston are working hard to address lead paint hazards in rental properties and have benefited greatly as recipients of various lead hazard control grants from the Federal Housing and Urban Development Department. Attracting responsible property owners and developers to the area helps to build upon this work by providing another means of redeveloping these properties and bringing them up to code. Lewiston is fortunate to be the home base of Healthy Homeworks, a community organization dedicated to attracting to our market compassionate, responsible, committed individuals looking to purchase multifamily properties, helping them to evaluate buildings, and then mentoring them through the process of renovating, leasing up, and managing safe, high-quality, affordable units. What I have heard time and time again from this organization and others is that data on these properties is not readily available to tenants or buyers, at least not in a timely manner that allows stakeholders to access it when they need it. Currently, the only way to get a list of properties under a lead abatement order is through a FOA request, which can sometimes take several months to fulfill and are already out of date upon receipt. How can buyers or tenants make responsible, informed financial and life decisions when this vital information is so difficult to procure? Without it, buyers are waiting and missing opportunities, and families continue to live in unsafe housing. The creation of a statewide rental registry would provide further transparency and efficiency to the work being done in Lewiston and serves to benefit property owners, developers, and residents across the state by protecting their investments and assuring access to safe and affordable housing. I am pleased to be a co-sponsor of this bill. I urge the committee to support it, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Representative Cloutier. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day. And next up is Mr. Jorgensen from Maine State Housing.
Hello again. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Eric Jorgensen. I'm Director of Government Relations at the Maine State Housing Authority. I'm actually speaking neither for nor against this bill, and I don't know how, I'm still not clear on how these, how I get where I am sometimes, so I apologize if that's out of order. But while you, the policymakers, need to decide on whether this is a project worthy of state funding, and I certainly think it could provide some really great information, we can say here with certainty that what this bill proposes is going to be a very complicated project. It's going to require a large amount of staffing and significant funding to build, as well as ongoing permanent staff support to keep current. And I think just collecting the initial data is going to be a task with manifold challenges. And I guess I'd start by just saying that you need to consider that Maine has a diffused population of more than 150,000 rental units scattered across the state's 488 cities, towns, and localities. Rental apartments are a largely private, unregulated industry, so there's really no ready source of information with which to populate a registry like this. Rental properties range from accessory dwelling units, like we've heard earlier, to 20-story high-rise towers. They range from tax credit finance, low-income housing to elderly facilities to supportive housing. But I guess I'd just say that the majority of these rentals, more than 80,000 of them, are small properties with buildings with fewer than 10 units. Landlords, on the other hand, range from large property management companies to Maine's 24 public housing authorities to small real estate partnerships to elderly people who rent out a unit or two to fund their retirement. It's likely that not all these owners would have a desire to be part of this type of a statewide database. The other major factor, I think, will be municipal cooperation, which will be required for all the land, code, and property data. This will need to be through voluntary submission or some sort of mandate. And I think that small towns in particular, which already have staffing problems, and we have reason to think that identifying rental properties in a given community might require even different levels of effort by municipal officials depending on the town. So I'd just say the city of Portland, for example, already requires landlords to participate in a rental registry, charges them on a mandatory per unit registration fee, and has a program in place to inspect each unit on a regular basis to make sure they comply with safety standards and the like. And the fees owners pay help fund the staff of the office that does this. So in the absence of a mandate like that, it's not clear how one would gather the data needed for a local, let alone a statewide registry. Finally, I'll just say that, if this project is intended, in fact, to serve as a live platform for people who are searching for apartments, the nature of that data is going to require near constant updating as units get rented, as they become available, as they undergo changes in ownership, and accrue issues like code violations that would need to be recorded. Maine already does have a statewide apartment search registry, which is created in conjunction with mainhousingsearch.org. With a much simpler mission and data than is proposed here, but even that service requires continual staffing and expenditure. So I just want to, I want to say that I really do, I am really talking neither for nor against here. I know I've been sort of a wet blanket, but I think that, there's no question that if such a registry like this could be built, it would likely yield a lot of useful information for the housing community, for apartment seekers, for community officials and other stakeholders. And I really get why why this is being proposed. But I do think that we have to be really clear about the formidable nature of such a data gathering effort on a statewide basis. So that's what I'd say. We were trying to provide some kind of an adequate, some kind of a cost estimate, but we really ran into trouble here in our office. I know that
Mr. Jorgensen, your 3 minutes are up if you could.
Okay. That's all I'm going to say. I'm happy to answer questions if you've got them. And thank you for having me again.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. Representative Bradstreet has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Mr. Jorgensen. Should this go on to be enacted, do you see Maine Housing as being responsible for ensuring the accuracy of all the, maybe even legally responsible for ensuring the accuracy of all the data you would get from various places?
That's a good question. I don't think we've gone that far into it yet, but it certainly would be a question for us that would have to figure out. I mean, I think when you start dealing with things like code violations and other stuff, that would probably have implications that go beyond simply listing a unit's availability or how many there are, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I would have to look into that a little bit, and I can do that.
Are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. Jorgensen? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jorgensen is the last person who is signed up to testify on this bill. And seeing no other people in the lobby who would like to testify, I will close the public hearing on LD 1397. I will now open the public hearing on LD 1546. An act to prevent homelessness by establishing the Rental Relief Fund within the Maine State Housing Authority, sponsored by Representative Grayson Lookner of Portland. Welcome, Representative Lookner.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, you are on. Good morning.
Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and honorable colleagues on the Committee of Labor and Housing. My name is Grayson Lookner, and I represent the neighborhoods of Libbytown, Nason's Corner, Rosemont, and Strawwater in Portland. I'm here to introduce LD 1546, an act to prevent homelessness by establishing the rental relief fund within the Maine State Housing Authority. As you've heard a lot today, housing and homelessness were already a crisis in Maine long before the pandemic. Maine is frequently among the states with the least affordable rents when comparing the cost of rent to average wages. Additionally, between the years of 2014 and 2019, some Maine cities and towns were among the fastest, saw some of the fastest increasing rents in the entire country. These dynamics, coupled with the onslaught of the coronavirus pandemic, has resulted in joblessness and a dramatic spike in the demand for real estate in Maine, which in turn has led to thousands of tenants in our state being on the brink of being unable to afford their rent and subsequently at acute risk of homelessness. Our state spends millions every year on emergency measures to serve people experiencing homelessness. This money is spent on housing vouchers, emergency room visits, police and emergency intervention, municipal general assistance, indigent legal services, aid to numerous agencies and nonprofits throughout Maine that serve this population, and also, a myriad of other costs borne by the public. This money could be much better spent on preventing people from slipping into homelessness in the first place. And the best way to do this is to establish in perpetuity the Emergency Rental Assistance Program that was created by federal funding in the CARES Act of 2020. Preventing renters from falling into homelessness has innumerable benefits for the public. Children in these households will be much more likely to succeed in schools. And when work becomes available, these renters will be much more likely to pursue those jobs. From a public health perspective, people without stable housing are at a much greater risk of contracting and spreading COVID-19 and other illnesses. People who are able to access rental assistance will be able to afford other basic necessities and will not need to rely on other public services that are already stretched thin. If there is one public expenditure that the state can make that will have the greatest amount of good for Mainers at risk of homelessness, keeping those folks housed is it. Property owners, management companies, and landlords have all been enthusiastically supportive of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program established by the CARES Act. So much so that I originally thought we could explore mechanisms of funding this program by raising revenues within the state. It has come to my attention recently, however, that this program is well funded and will be for years to come. So I've actually dropped that provision. We don't need to find mechanisms of funding this within the state because the program does have adequate funding just through federal money. So with that in mind, we should take this opportunity to establish this critical service beyond the immediate term. Nearly 30% of Maine households are renters, and of those, nearly half are cost burdened and at risk of eviction. Every year, we have a growing number of people experiencing homelessness dying in Portland and around the state from preventable causes. The housing and homelessness crisis must be addressed in a bold manner from this legislature. Establishing the Emergency Rental Relief Fund is now is one robust way that we can accomplish this. So thank you for hearing my testimony, and I urge you to vote odds pass. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Lookner. Are there any questions from the committee for the bill sponsor? Seeing none. Thank you for being here. We will now move to people who have signed up to testify on this bill, beginning first with Mr. Eric Jorgensen from the Maine State Housing Authority. Did we lose Mr. Jorgensen? If so, oh, there he is.
There we go. I'm back. Thank you. Nice to see you all again. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Eric Jorgensen, Director of Government Relations at Maine Housing. As you all know, the state of Maine is currently having $200 million in federal funds to provide rental assistance for anyone who's lost income in the past 15 months as a direct or indirect result of COVID-19. I think that would cover all the categories of person described in Part A of this bill. We are expecting an additional tranche of money and more than $150 million of additional funding to arrive in the coming months with even fewer restrictions. This means that the assistance should be available to everyone described in Part B of the bill. It'll be open to people not only who have encountered difficulty paying rent as the direct result of COVID, but also having difficulty during the time of COVID. So we think, and it's going to last beyond the current year. So we feel that covers people in Part B of the bill. All this is to say that while we completely agree with the value of having a rental assistance program, and it's nice to see my neighbor, Representative Lookner here, we do not feel this bill is really necessary at this time. If you remove the funding mechanism from LD 1546, as the sponsor has asked, it simply becomes an unfunded program on the books, yet one that would, under what was left in the bill after you took out the funding mechanism, still require Maine Housing to conduct rulemaking, which is a staff-intensive process, and for us to submit an annual report to the legislature. So if this committee does decide to go forward with this bill as an unfunded program, we would ask that the rulemaking be permissive and that the annual report requirement be suspended at least until such time as state money is actually appropriated. We feel that the rental assistance is an area that is more than well provided for in our state right now and for the foreseeable future. So I appreciate your time again and happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Warren.
So Winnie, do you have any perspective, or could you speak to the value of this program in the longer term, if the funding mechanism were to be included, or if it hadn't been asked to be removed? Is there a need outside of COVID, especially with that Part B eligibility? I'm just wondering if, down the line beyond COVID.
I think that's a great question, Representative Warren. I think we've seen a lot of rental increases going up over the years. We know about affordability issues, and those are well-known facts. And I think that once the COVID relief money does get exhausted or goes away, I think there will be need for this sort of a thing if the legislature chooses to allot money for it. I mean, it's there's a lot of needs in the state, and this is one of them. And I do agree completely with the idea that a good rental assistance program can keep people in their homes and keep them from becoming homeless, and that's important. But it's, I just figure right now we've got more money than we have ever had and ever conceivably will have again for that. So I'm just saying you may want to revisit this in a few years, but not right. I would say not right now.
You good, Representative Warren? Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. See you again.
Thank you.
Next up is Andrew Cashman to testify in opposition to the bill. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. Distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Andy Cashman. I'm a partner at Freddie Flaherty, and I'm here today on behalf of my client, the Maine Association of Realtors, which has over 5,600 members statewide, representing buyers and sellers of real estate, commercial and residential throughout the state. I did file written comments to this. In the interest of time, I'm going to divert from those. Also, our primary opposition to this was to the increase in the real estate transfer tax that was proposed in the bill. Just for the sake of specificity, that was in Section 2 of the bill. If I understand correctly from the sponsor, he would be looking to propose removing that provision, which we would strongly support. There was some discussion of whether or not, it would make sense to in fact remove that. So if I may just briefly speak to the reasons that we would oppose implementing an increase in the tax. as it was drafted, the bill would increase the real estate transfer tax, roughly double it. And that would raise the tax for anybody buying and selling property in Maine for any reason. That could include first-time home buyers, people that are downsizing, the elderly, people that are on hard times, and many, many other situations. And in the end here, this doesn't address affordable housing, which we think is really the core issue. It does address rental assistance, which of course is an important issue. But as Mr. Jorgensen referenced, there has been a considerable amount of federal money that's come in. There was $28.4 million that the governor put into the coronavirus rental relief fund, and then another $200 million in rent relief fund that's coming from the emergency rental assistance program. So as Mr. Jorgensen referenced, there is more than adequate funding for this, for the foreseeable future, as I heard him say. Just the other reasons why we oppose increasing the real estate transfer tax overall, especially in this respect, is that it's constantly being swept into the general fund. And that increase shifts the tax burden for general issues onto people that are transferring real estate, which we think is problematic because historically 75% of residential real estate transactions in Maine are among Mainers buying and selling property. And even here during the pandemic, if I remember correctly, I believe it's in the 60% now of people in 2020 that were buying and selling real estate. I see my time's growing short, so I would just say that MAR very strongly advocates for legislation that we believe would effectively address affordable housing. We also operate a nonprofit that has provided millions of dollars to affordable housing over the years as well. So with those reasons, we're encouraged that the sponsor has suggested removing that provision. We would strongly encourage doing that if you were to choose to move forward with that proposal. So I appreciate the committee's time. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cashman. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
And I do not see anyone else who is signed up to testify on this bill. So with that, I will close the public hearing on LD 1546. I will make the public aware that we may, not shall, we may take up LD 1546 in our afternoon work session today. And so let's see if we have one more public hearing scheduled, and I'm looking to see if the bill sponsor is here. She is not yet, so until she arrives, we will be at ease. Welcome back to the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. We are preparing for our final public hearing of the morning session. And that would be LD. I will open up the public hearing on LD 1201. Resolve directing the Maine State Housing Authority to engage stakeholders in an examination of fair chance housing policy options presented by Representative Rachel Talbot Ross of Portland. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning. Good morning to you all. Senator Hickman and Representative Sylvester and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Rachel Talbot Ross. I represent House District 40, which includes the Portland neighborhoods of Parkside, Bayside, East Bayside, Oakdale, and the University of Southern Maine campus. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present LD 1201, Resolve, directing the Maine State Housing Authority to engage stakeholders in an examination of fair chance housing policy options. As you well know, housing is among the most very basic of a person's needs, and it's fundamental to an individual's success and well-being. For people who have been involved with the criminal justice system, however, a safe, appropriate place to call home is often kept out of reach. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, people who have been to prison just once experience homelessness at a rate nearly 7 times higher than the general public. And people who have been incarcerated more than once have rates 13 times higher than the general public. The inability to access housing is a tremendous barrier when re-entering one's community after incarceration, contributing to poor outcomes such as recidivism. This is demonstrated by the fact that, according to the advocacy organization, Opportunity Starts at Home, recent homelessness is far more common among incarcerated people than the general public. This is a cruel cycle with serious consequences, not only for these individuals and their families, but for our society as a whole. In 2016, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development released guidance to all housing providers on their use of criminal records. The guidance recognized that blanket bans against people with criminal records could run afoul of the Federal Fair Housing Act in light of the disproportionate number of people of color in the criminal justice system. To help mitigate against that disparate racial impact, one best practice that the Housing and Urban Development guidance offers is for housing providers to delay consideration of a person's criminal record until that person has been found to be otherwise qualified. A concept similar to the ban the box movement that has received widespread acceptance amongst employment circles. Such policies are known as fair chance housing. They seek to ensure that housing providers consider a person's financial and other qualifications before asking about prior involvement with the criminal justice system, with some exception. LD 1201 directs the Maine State Housing Authority to convene a stakeholder group in order to examine fair chance housing policies considered or adopted elsewhere and form recommendations that would address housing issues for formerly incarcerated people without placing excessive burdens on housing providers. That's a key. To do so without placing excessive burdens on housing providers. Maine State Housing would submit a report to this committee by February 15th of next year, which could include suggested legislation. LD 1201 also authorized the committee to report out legislation based on the report. As you will see, the stakeholders outlined in the bill as drafted includes housing providers and landlords. Through the stakeholder process, we can assure that any inconvenience to housing providers to implement fair chance housing policy is minimal, particularly when compared with the immeasurable burden of homelessness on so many of our Maine residents when they return home from the criminal justice system. I want to point out that this bill was presented in the 129th legislature, and as a result of talks with housing providers convened by the Maine State Housing Authority, we concluded that we were not ready to adopt a fair chance housing policy at this time. In working with the providers and some of the stakeholders, what we also concluded was that we wanted to continue to work together to find reasonable solutions moving forward and to bring them back to this committee. So this bill is a product of those conversations from the past 2 years that we hope to continue with your approval moving forward, and then to bring back some recommendations for you all to further consider. We're not there yet. This is a bill that creates the pathway to getting there. It should be no fiscal note. There should, all stakeholders are invited into the process. And I do believe you'll hear from Maine State Housing Authority soon about their position on this matter to continue to engage stakeholders as well. I want to thank you for your time this morning, and we'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Talbot Ross. Are there any questions for the Assistant Majority Leader at this time? Seeing none, we have one person signed up to testify in favor of the bill. That is Eric Jorgensen. There are also 2 people who have signed up late to testify, and I'm going to ask for them to testify first so that we can finish up with Mr. Jorgensen from Maine State Housing. So with that, I will recognize Ray-Luc Lavasseur. I may have said that incorrectly. Testify on this bill. And Mr. Jorgensen, I'm going to come back to you at the end. How's that? Thank you. So Mr. Ray-Luc Lavasseur, if you are here, you may turn on your video or your microphone. You might be in the wormhole. Oh no, there he is. Can you hear us, sir? Well, in that case, since there might be a technical difficulty, oh, here we go, connecting to audio. I see it happening right before my eyes. These wormholes can be very difficult to get through from time to time.
Still glad to be here.
So why don't we do this, since it is taking a little while for that to happen. I was in one for 5 minutes the other day. I will go to Mr. Jorgensen to present his testimony instead, and we will come back to those who would like to speak as well. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Jorgensen.
Thank you very much. And I'm still here and I appreciate being back. And my name is Eric Jorgensen from Maine State Housing, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the committee. I'm pleased to speak in favor of LD 1201. And this is an outgrowth of LD 1572 from the 129th legislature, as you heard from Representative Talbot Ross. It's a bill that got caught up in the COVID shutdown before work on it was concluded. And that bill had a very simple aim, and it was this idea that preventing prospective landlords from considering an applicant's criminal history until all other requirements for rental applications have been satisfied. It's simply an idea that someone who's repaid their debt to society should not continue to be punished by an inability to find housing after having completed a sentence. As simple as that bill was in concept, it did prove extremely difficult to find a path forward that was acceptable to all the stakeholders. Over the course of more than a year, Maine Housing convened several stakeholder meetings to try and understand the issue to arrive at a workable solution. These meetings included large and small landlords, property managers, fair housing and civil rights advocates, public housing authorities, Maine Human Rights Commission, and a handful of legislators who really worked on this. In the end, that stakeholder group concluded that there was no clear path forward with regard to actually implementing that particular bill. And there was a sense, however, that the issue might be something that could be explored through a more deliberate study process, one that wasn't tied to specific legislation. So the bill was amended into a study resolve, and then COVID hit, and that was it. The bill and the amendment both died. So With regard to the proposed study last spring, Maine Housing had agreed to continue in the role of convener, helping the study commission move through its work. And we're very much still willing to play that role. And although we are under no illusion that this is going to be an easy process. We know we're likely to encounter many of the same impasses that the work group ran into earlier, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to keep trying. And I think we might be able to find some kind of a common ground that we can build on. So this committee knows well Maine Housing's hesitancy to participate in too many legislative studies, and we've been invited to participate in a record number of them this year. But that said, if this legislature feels this important issue merits continued exploration, we're standing by to honor that commitment we made last year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Questions. Thank you, Mr. Jorgensen. Are there any questions? Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Jorgensen. I hope you're taking vitamins and all that. So I appreciate what you said. So it's your stance right now then that until we do such a study, we're not ready to move ahead with any type of legislation you talked about before because we don't have buy-in yet from all the stakeholders. Is that true?
I think that's my understanding based on what I remember from last year and what I've heard from my office here. That's the issue. And I think there are some, hopefully there is some things we can come together on and figure out some direction to move in. So I think that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. Jorgensen? Seeing none, thank you, sir. We may see you again later.
Hope not.
Today, you never know. And with that, we will try to receive the testimony from either Peter Lemon, I believe. Let me check my sheet to make sure that I don't know if Peter Lemon from the Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition is here. I do see Ray-Luc Levasseur still in the room, so I will call on either one of them or both to turn on their videos and or their microphones and provide testimony. And there could just be technical problems. I see that Ray-Luc Levasseur is trying again. We'll give him a minute or so. And I'll say that if we can't make this happen now, I will close the public hearing and we will take our break and we will possibly also bring this bill up in our afternoon work session to dispense with. And if that is the case, then anyone who would like to speak about the need for this, I will allow at that time. If the technical difficulties have been resolved, and I'm trying to filibuster to have some voice in this process until this wormhole issue is solved. It is very windy again today, so I would imagine that may have something to do with the problem that we face.
AKA vamping, Mr. Chair.
Vamping. I will be quiet. So it does seem that there is a technical problem. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on LD 1201. It is 11:26. Our afternoon work sessions are scheduled to begin at noon. I am actually going to move those forward or backwards, depending upon where you come from, to 12:26, an hour from now, so that people can have an opportunity to grab a bite to eat, stretch, feel the wind, and then also have caucuses. And for Democrats and people who caucus with the Democrats on this committee, I will send a link very shortly, and we will meet at noon to caucus the bills for this afternoon. So we will all have at least a half an hour break. And you can also, I will ask the committee clerk to establish the work session link so that if the other caucus wants to use that breakout session, that's fine. We're gonna just do a link. So with that, we will be at ease until 12:26. Enjoy your break and your lunch today, everyone.